Story 1. Some important information. I'm a 33-year-old woman, and I underwent breast reduction surgery for health reasons 2 weeks ago. I've been recovering, which means my chest area is still very sore. I'm sensitive to things that wouldn't normally bother me, like driving over a pothole or standing for too long. My partner and I decided to visit one of our favorite diners for breakfast to celebrate his birthday. Since I'm still in recovery and can't do much, I offered to at least pay since he would have to drive us both. When we got there, two older couples I'd guess they were in their early 70s came into the small waiting area. It was cold outside, so I didn't blame them for coming in. However, there wasn't anywhere to sit when they entered. I was seated in a single chair by the door. Normally, I'd offer my seat to one of them out of politeness, but I stayed seated because standing for too long would make my chest sore due to my recent surgery. I wasn't sure how much longer we'd have to wait, and I didn't want to risk the discomfort. In the waiting area, you don't put your name on a wait list. Instead, you wait in line, and the closer you are to the door, the sooner you get seated. It was a bit confusing at first, but once it was explained, we took our spot at the back of the line. When a group that had been waiting near the door was called to be seated, it freed up some space on the bench. Those of us who had been waiting started shuffling down the bench, getting closer to the door. The elderly group, not realizing how the line worked, immediately sat down, which technically meant they were cutting ahead. The other couples and I tried to politely explain the system to them, but one of the elderly women interrupted loudly, saying, "Well, you should let my friend sit because of her age, you know?" She gave me a pointed side eye, rolled her eyes, and shook her head at her friend, acting as if we should be ashamed of ourselves. One of the families waiting with us tried to explain the line system again, but she wasn't interested in listening. I finally spoke up and said, "I'm sorry, I would have given you my seat, but I'm recovering from surgery and can't stand for long periods. I apologize." There was a long, uncomfortable silence until the same woman said, "Well, do you want to sit here?" But I stopped her and replied, "No, please, I'm fine where I am." We all waited quietly until it was our turn to be seated. The lesson I took from this experience is that you shouldn't assume someone sitting down doesn't need the seat just because they don't look like they do. Even though I'm recovering from surgery, I made an effort to get dressed up and put on makeup because I still want to feel good about myself. I was raised to be considerate and offer my seat to elderly people, pregnant women, or those who are injured. However, if I'm the one who is injured, I have the right to keep my seat. Please don't jump to conclusions about others. I've heard many stories much worse than mine, where people with disabilities are criticized for using parking spots, electric scooters, or other accommodations just because they don't look disabled, which is completely unfair. I'm only recovering temporarily from surgery, and I won't have to live with this every day, but others do. We need to learn to let go of our sense of entitlement and give others the benefit of the doubt. And if we need help or special consideration, we should ask. That's how we can make better treatment of others more common. Story 2. This was last year. In hindsight, I feel a little bad for the professor. He wasn't the worst I'd ever had, and he was up against a university which was in turmoil behind the scenes and spearheading an untested new course. That being said, I am paying quite exorbitantly for this education, and he was a right snot about this so, It was a history course, and one of the assignments was a group project wherein we presented in front of the class. There was a 3-hour seminar taking place in a lecture hall, the last hour of which was reserved for 2 groups to go up and present at a half-hour apiece. This would involve a cue and a session afterwards, just to keep us on our toes, I suppose. Professor really emphasized that we pick the week and topic we're going to present in, and that's that. It's first come, first serve, and if you miss your spot, you get a 0. Thought nothing of it at the time, seemed fair. Didn't like his attitude, but whatever, right? Well, I won the lottery with the group I was assigned. They were grand lads and a dream to work with. We decided on an advantageous week to present given our schedules, and we spent the run-up fine-tuning this presentation and really getting it to work. We used a stopwatch and everything. We even brought in outsiders to ask questions we might not predict. all was well. Except we were presenting in week 5, and a disturbing pattern had emerged during the seminars in weeks 2, 3, and 4. For all his talk about keeping things constrained and everyone working within a schedule, whoever went second was screwed. The first group always ran long, and the second group had to make do with, at most, 20 minutes. You could see the stress on their faces. So come week 5, the rest of my group, a little bit more nervous than I am, worries aloud about whether all of our careful planning will be for pot. I decide to throw a Hail Mary thinking that the worst I could get is a no, right? So I go up right before class starts and ask the prof what are the odds we might go on first out of the 2. After all, we're sure we have this down to 30 minutes. The dude proceeds to rake me across the coals in front of everyone. It was a normal speaking voice, but the podium was right by the door, and people were filing in. Tells me not to ask such a stupid question, and to go back to my seat. I go back, tail between my legs, pissed off, and sit with steam shooting out of my ears for the next 2 hours. Sure enough, the other group goes first. And sure enough, they run long. We shoot concerned looks to the professor, who is too busy watching the other group to notice. Come 50 minutes in, and the first group is just about wrapping up. The guys in my group are silently freaking out about this. Nightmare, right? That's when the prof stands up, polite applause all around, and then says, "Well, I guess we're finishing early today, huh?" Like a scene out of a courtroom drama, the 4 of us stand up like a shot and ask what the hell is going on. He can't quite hear us from back, and we're all talking at once, so he asks, "What's going on?" I charge down those steps like King Kong. In the same tone of voice, in front of the same door that people were now filing out of, I tell this guy that we're booked for the assignment today and we have something prepared. Double what? Turns out he totally plumb forgot that we were presenting today, and that's why he was so mad at my suggestion earlier. So I tell him we're presenting now, to an empty room, or he's giving us 100. The poor guy sure did try. Insisted we hadn't signed up this week, insisted that he could schedule us in next week, even assuming 2 of 4 of our group weren't away on placement for their teaching degree. We booked for this week as ordered, insisted that he had somewhere to be, not my problem, mate. Dude just had to wear it. After making a phone call to presumably his next appointment, he had to stand there, white as a sheet, and wear it. I'll never forget the look on his face. So we presented to a lecture hall empty of all but the professor and 2 students who, I guess, wanted to see more of the show. We got a great grade, to boot. Story 3. This incident occurred in 2018 when I graduated from high school. Allow me to provide a quick overview of the Swiss school system. Typically, students attend school until 9th grade. Those who wish to pursue university education transfer to grammar high school from 8th to 12th grade. I chose to continue my studies and enrolled in high school. It's worth noting that in Switzerland, at least in my canton state, any grade below 75% is considered a failure. We have a rather stringent system in place. At high school, I quickly became friends with Chelsea, my current girlfriend, and Alicia. Alicia is the type of person who can be amusing in small doses. She often portrays herself as a victim and can only talk about herself. However, spending too much time with her can be emotionally draining. She never takes responsibility for her actions, often citing her upbringing in the foster care system as an excuse. This particular incident occurred about 2 months before our final exams. Graduating requires passing the final exams, of course. However, the finals only account for half of your eventual grade. The other half is determined by your last report card. For example, if I achieved in my final English exam, but had a C on my last report card, my eventual grade would be a B, and so on. Alicia struggled with this system because her last report card wasn't particularly impressive. She needed to excel in most subjects to graduate. One would think she'd take extensive notes and start studying early, right? Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. She procrastinated until 2 months before our finals, while Chelsea and I diligently studied. I was always the student who shared her notes in our class group chat for anyone interested. This detail becomes significant later. We had a lengthy list of topics we needed to master in mathematics. I wrote comprehensive notes for each subject and kept them in a folder in my locker. I only shared some of them in the group chat when someone inquired about a specific topic. One day, I went to my locker and my notes were missing. I panicked, as I had spent weeks writing them. I searched for an entire week and experienced approximately 3 anxiety attacks, fearing I wouldn't pass and would have to redo all the work. That's when Alicia casually informed me that she had taken them the other day when I asked her to retrieve a book from my locker. She hadn't planned to tell me at all because, in her words, "It's not like you need them anyway, you had them long enough. If you didn't make copies, it's not my fault." Her blatant sense of entitlement was enough to inspire me to devise a plan. A cunning plan. Not only had she stolen my notes, but if I hadn't bothered her so much about it, she wouldn't have even told me she had taken them. She was merely a high school acquaintance, and I knew I'd never associate with her again after graduation. Frankly, I didn't care about what would happen to her. Her self-centered attitude was the final straw. I apologized for creating drama. "It's okay, you just are like that sometimes." I was about to lose my composure and continued my school day as usual. Alicia kept calling me about notes, even before this incident, especially my notes for various books. She had chosen the same books to avoid extra studying. I began giving her incorrect analyses and fabricated notes. They were obvious enough to be identified as wrong if she thought critically, but not too blatant. If she had read the books, she would have known it was nonsense. I did the same with our English books, French materials, German texts, chemistry notes, physics summaries, and psychology outlines. She already had my math notes, so I couldn't alter those, but I could fabricate information for the other subjects. After investing considerable time in creating false notes, I witnessed the outcome unfold a day before graduation. We went to a pub with our teacher to watch a football game. I don't even remember where she distributed our results. I passed with a 5.38 in Switzerland. Grades range from 1 to 6, with 6 being the best, so approximately an A. Alicia turned pale. She received a 3.21 equivalent to a D. She had failed all of her classes except mathematics and psychology. It appears she had relied solely on my notes without reading the assigned books or textbooks. I had to conceal a grin. My girlfriend still believes it was cruel, but honestly, it served as a reality check for her sense of entitlement and self-centeredness. From what I've heard, she is currently attempting to repeat the year and try again. Hopefully, this time without stealing her friend's notes. Edit. Thank you to everyone who explained the difference between a cup and a mug. Edit 2. Many are asking, and no, I don't regret my actions. To pass her finals, she needed to study and read her French, German, and English books. The task was not to simply memorize notes and bluff her way through the exams. The language finals, at least for the books, were conducted orally. If she had read the books, she would have known my notes were incorrect. So, in all honesty, it was her own fault. Story 4. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was heading home after a long week at work. My job as a software developer often left me mentally drained, and all I wanted was to get home, order some takeout, and relax. I usually took the main roads, but traffic was particularly bad that day. A coworker had mentioned a shortcut through a residential area that could shave off 15 minutes from my commute. Eager to get home faster, I decided to give it a try. The narrow street was lined with quaint houses, and I was cautiously making my way through when I saw a car approaching from the opposite direction. The street was barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass, so I slowed down, expecting the other driver to find a spot to pull over and let me through. But as the car got closer, I realized the driver had no intention of stopping. It was a sleek, expensive-looking SUV, and behind the wheel was a woman with a severe bob haircut and oversized sunglasses. She was barreling down the middle of the street like she owned it. I came to a stop, thinking surely she'd realize there wasn't enough room and back up. But nope, she just kept coming, getting closer and closer to my front bumper. Finally, I rolled down my window and called out to her. I politely asked her to back up because the street was getting crowded, so I could pass. Her response left me speechless. She yelled back that she lived on this street and wasn't going anywhere, demanding that I should back up instead. I tried to explain that there were now cars behind me, making it impossible for me to back up. I pleaded with her to find a spot to pull over so we could all get through. But she just got more aggressive, asking if I knew who she was and insisting she wouldn't move for anyone because it was her neighborhood. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Who did this lady think she was? I tried reasoning with her one more time, pointing out that we were both stuck unless one of us moved. I suggested that since there was more room behind her, she could back up a little. Her response was to shout that she didn't have time for this and ordered me to get out of her way. Before I could react, she revved her engine and lurched forward. I watched in horror as she deliberately steered towards my car. There was a sickening crunch as her SUV collided with my front end, pushing me backward. I was in shock. Did that really just happen? But it wasn't over. This crazy woman then started zigzagging her car, scraping along the side of mine as she tried to force her way through. In the process, she also hit the car behind me. People had come out of their houses to see what all the commotion was about. I heard gasps and shouts, and someone yelling that they were calling the police. Finally, the woman managed to squeeze past, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. She sped off down the street without even a glance back. I got out of my car, surveying the damage in disbelief. My once pristine sedan was now a mangled mess of dented metal and scraped paint. The person in the car behind me got out too, looking just as stunned as I felt. The other driver expressed their disbelief at what had just happened, asking if I had seen how the woman had rammed right into us. I agreed, saying I couldn't believe it either, and asked if they were okay. They replied that they were fine but shaken up, then commented on the state of their car, calling the situation insane. As we stood there trying to process what had just occurred, a man approached us, holding up his phone. He informed us that he had captured the entire incident on video and had already sent the footage to the police, who were on their way. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. At least we had evidence of what happened. Within minutes, we heard sirens approaching, and 2 police cars pulled up to the scene. The officers took our statements and reviewed the video footage. They seemed as baffled by the woman's behavior as we were. One officer told us they had identified the vehicle and its owner, assuring us they would be paying her a visit soon. He advised us to contact our insurance companies and provide them with the report number for this incident. As the adrenaline started to wear off, the reality of the situation sank in. My car was wrecked, and I'd have to deal with insurance claims and repairs. But more than that, I was angry. This entitled woman thought she could just destroy other people's property and drive away like nothing happened. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I turned to the police officer and expressed my desire to press charges, stating my intention to sue the woman for every penny of damage she caused. The officer nodded, understanding my frustration. He explained that it was my right to do so, and informed me that they would be charging her with reckless driving, leaving the scene of an accident and destruction of property. He added that the video evidence would make for a strong case. In the days that followed, I learned more about the woman who had caused such chaos. Apparently, she was known in the neighborhood for her entitled attitude and rude behavior. She'd had run-ins with neighbors before, but nothing like this. I hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit against her for the damage to my car and emotional distress. The video evidence was damning, and her previous history of entitlement only strengthened our case. When we finally went to court, the woman's arrogance had turned to panic. She tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that she felt threatened by my car blocking her way. But the video told a different story. The judge was not amused by her excuses. Not only was she ordered to pay for all damages to both cars, but she also faced hefty fines and a suspended license. The cherry on top, the judge ordered her to attend mandatory anger management and defensive driving courses. As I left the courthouse, I felt a sense of vindication. It had been a long and stressful process, but justice had been served. My car was repaired, paid for by her insurance, and I even received additional compensation for my trouble. The entitled woman's reputation in the neighborhood was in tatters. I heard through the grapevine that she was thinking of moving, unable to face her neighbors after the incident. As for me, I learned a valuable lesson about standing up for myself and not letting entitled people walk all over others, and you can bet I never took that shortcut again. Some time savers just aren't worth the hassle. Story 5. I finished a workout and wanted to treat myself to happy hour because physical exertion means I can drink alcohol with no consequences. My happy hour bar, you have one, was hella crowded, but I found a seat at the bar. About 2/3 RDS of the way through my IPA, I realized I really had to pee. As I took my sweet time deciding if it was really worth getting up to use the bathroom, an entire family-sized family moved into the table behind me. I'm not totally sold on the logic of trying to find a table for 25 at a popular bar during happy hour, but I sincerely applauded their optimism. Unfortunately, while they'd managed to manifest a table, they'd failed to ask the universe for an appropriate number of chairs. Grandma somehow got the short straw there, although given how she behaved, I'm not remotely shocked that she raised a family who would let the matriarch stand. Anyway, I finally decided that I could either give in and use the bathroom or embarrass myself, so I prepared to get up. I ordered another beer. I plopped a coaster on top of it. I left my phone beside my glass. I did a weird hand gesture at the bartender who gave me a thumbs up. Short of putting a cardboard cutout of myself in my seat, I could not have made it any clearer that I was planning on returning. I leave with a sense of nervousness, though, and relieved myself as quickly as I could without alarming my bladder. Not fast enough, though. I returned to see Grandma moving my goddamn seat, like standing there with her hands on my chair, starting to pick it up and move it to her table. "Hi, excuse me, that's my seat," I exclaimed in my best customer service voice. She looked at me. "I don't have a chair." I told her I'm sorry about that, I was not, but I was currently using the one in her hands, so she'd need to find a different solution. "I don't have a chair," she repeated, so I got into Groundhog Day mode, too. Then she shifted. She didn't think I was coming back, so she assumed she could have my seat. I asked her what made her think I wasn't returning. The coaster over my beer, or my phone sitting beside my glass. Like, I would rather leave my arm behind than my phone. So let's stop lying, you lying liar face. Grandma's family just sat silently behind her, looking like they were praying for the meteor, which makes me think that Grandma tries to steal chairs on the regular. She repeated, "I don't have a chair." "No," I said, "you do not." And I took my chair from her hands and returned to my drink. Story 6. My 2019 was wild, but with everything finally on the up and up, I feel I can tell this story here. After university late 2018, I fell on rough times and was forced to move back to my hometown. I tried to transfer my job to a branch in my area, but failed. Thus, I needed to get a new job. I settled for a 20-hour-a-week job at a betting shop with a second bartending job in the evenings. The betting shop is the target for my revenge, which was entirely accidental. Involved are the following: Janelle, my manager's manager; Shay, my manager; Jorge and Gordon, my co-workers; and Cara, a co-worker at another store who is relevant later. Names changed and/or redacted. I ended up working behind the counter as a customer service manager, basically a step up from a cashier. It's fancy when seen on a curriculum vitae, but there's nothing really to it. I took bets, chatted with customers, helped people with machines, and for the vast majority of my shift sat around waiting for something to do. I got on well with my co-workers, or so I thought, and had no major issues. It was 20 hours a week, about £1 more than minimum wage, with a lot of overtime required of me and irregular shift patterns. Though I had no issue with the job, beyond how difficult it was to juggle the schedules of both of my jobs. In February of 2019, after working for the company for 6 months, I was invited to a probation hearing. It cannot be emphasized enough that it was a probation hearing in which I would have my performance reviewed, and as informed in training was entitled to a pay rise at the end of it. I arrived that morning to a disciplinary hearing where, without even a shred of evidence, I was accused of 11 different cash discrepancies, dating back to early November of 2018 shortly after I'd started, which all amounted to £271.36, all but one of which I'd never heard of before. These had apparently been reported and logged by my manager Shay and my co-workers, despite no one saying a word to me at all. Not a whisper in the 5 months this had apparently been occurring. I was told that it was unacceptable, a call was made to Human Resources, and I was terminated on the spot and forced to hand over my keys and to never set foot in the store again. To my protest, I was told the decision could not be appealed and I would eventually receive written confirmation of my employment termination in the post. I didn't let myself slump around and feel sorry for myself, so on the way home, I opened up Indeed and applied for a bunch of jobs, and before I arrived home had an interview set up for the next week at what is my current place of work. Now, I was furious, fuming at having gone to what I thought should have been a normal probation meeting, and having effectively been called a thief, and been banned for life from a place I'd never go to anyway. But somehow, my parents were angrier and ordered me to let them know when they got into contact with me again. Almost 2 weeks later, I received an email from the company's Human Resources Department, which reiterated the accusations and stated again that I was terminated. My mom sat me down in her kitchen and walked me through a letter response that was 2 parts professional and 3 parts scathing, ripping into them about their unprofessional conduct, their ludicrous claims, their lack of evidence, the holes in their story because there were quite a few, and finally, the cherry on the cake, the employment laws they'd broken. Now I didn't want much, just a nice reference, a promise that not a whisper of these accusations would turn up when my new job asked them for a reference, because by then I'd already been offered the job. I then attached the letter to an email to fire back at their Human Resources Department. Then I added Janelle's work email, then her boss's email, and finally, the holding company that owned the brand, because I wanted to make sure this was seen. A bit of background: the bedding shop I worked for is a brand that is owned by an international company. Their name behind the scenes is slapped on everything, and they pretty much dictate everything we did. I'm not sure if holding company is the correct term, but I'll stick to that for now. Anyway, I sent this email with a 48-hour window for a response. I received a reply the next day from the same email that my demands were being met. I smirked victoriously and moved on with my life, happy to wash my hands of the entire ordeal. However, I'd set off a chain reaction that I wouldn't know about until 3 months later. 3 months on, I'd settled into my new job, a call center position with double the hours and well over double the pay. I'd gone through training and was settling into my new position when I saw a new set of trainees settling in near my team. Among them was Gordon, one of my co-workers from the bedding shop. I was stunned. Gordon had been at the bedding shop for 6 years when I joined. He was well-liked, good at his job, and a favorite of the managers. There was no way he'd been fired. Though I didn't really want to talk to him, as I was of the impression that he, Jorge, and my manager had likely set me up, I did want to know what happened. Luckily, on seeing me in the break room one shift, he sought me out and told me everything. Apparently, my email had been read by the higher-ups in the holding company and had caused a lot of scrutiny to fall onto the bedding shops in our town, of which there were 3 in our area that Janelle was responsible for, 2 in my town and a 3rd in a neighboring one. Someone in Human Resources passed a message down to the area manager, Janelle's boss, claiming they wanted things investigated and they wanted results yesterday, causing him to drop everything and descend on our little town with the panic and aggression of a man whose superiors were watching his every breath. He went to Janelle wanting to know why he hadn't been made aware previously that I was apparently stealing money, why I had been given keys to the shop and shifts on my own when allegations of that nature were attributed to me, and why I hadn't been put under investigation. Turns out, Janelle had in fact put in my employee file that I was under investigation, but had never actually gone through with any of the official procedures for monitoring and investigating me. Thus, she had fired me for the accused crime without looking into it at all, falsely claiming otherwise. Thus, the area manager took the dates and amounts of the cash discrepancies, confirmed that they had been reported on those days without my knowledge in Shay's own logbook of the shop's cash, and sent that information onto our security team to investigate. Another little detail is that the closed-circuit television for every shop in the brand is outsourced to a private security company, which monitors each shop remotely and has access to all the cameras and video. As was procedure, they looked into the dates mentioned to see if I'd been doing anything untoward. I know I wasn't, and nothing was ever said to me. But they did find something. Turns out, money was going missing from the shop. But surprise, surprise, it wasn't me, but Jorge and Shay. They not only set me up for reasons I will never know, but were also falsifying numbers and cash checks on the system to hide it. One thing Shay was caught doing was deliberately shortchanging customers by taking portions of their winnings, without them even knowing it. Bear in mind, a lot of our customers were elderly men and women. Gordon claims that he once opened the shop after I and Shay had closed the night before and noticed a cash difference, but had been told not to say anything to me as I was under investigation, and it could compromise it. He did apologize, and I let it go. Needless to say, Jorge and Shay were fired. But it doesn't end there. Our team was small, including me. There were a total of 4 people working at the store, as they hadn't been able to hire anyone to replace me. Jorge and Shay's termination meant Gordon was the only employee at the busiest shop in our area. Even if they'd been able to get other colleagues from the 2 other shops to help out, it wouldn't have been enough to keep the shop open and manage the number of customers. So they closed the location down until they could get the staff to run it. It was at that point that Gordon handed in his resignation and applied for his job at my work, meaning they had no one. On top of that, Gordon's girlfriend worked in the same shop as Janelle, and she relayed that she was rarely at their store in the other town for the next few weeks before the area manager reported she was fired as well. No reason given to her. I was later issued an apology for everything by the area manager and informed Janelle was no longer with the company in an email sometime later. But somehow, it doesn't end there. With the store I worked at closed, this one being on the high street and where most people preferred to go, the only other location in town was the much smaller location in the suburbs, the one where Kara worked, alone. She suddenly received an influx of customers into her tiny store space, and absolutely no support from other staff or upper management. Thus, for her own mental health, having already been overworked and underpaid, running an entire store by herself, she quit, meaning that location had to be closed down too. All of this at the worst possible time, March, when the Cheltenham Festival was occurring, which is a huge moneymaker for the gambling industry, even in a small town like ours. An opportunity the 3 other betting shops on the high street reaped the benefits of instead of my old place, as the former customers went to them instead. As it currently stands, just over a year later, both shops remain closed, and I'm currently entering a job in cybersecurity, the training for which I paid for with my current job. Thanks for firing me, you did me a favor. A later update to the story. Gordon and I got in touch with our old area manager, and we were able to get a bit more information. The security team rifled through about 3 years' worth of footage after they found out about Jorge and Shay, and have estimated that in that period alone, they both stole nearly £4,000 through various means. The parent company also got involved and searched through years' worth of their cash checks until checks and noted plenty of irregularities. The parent company pursued criminal charges, and the 2 were arrested, but, as far as our area manager knows, the case is still ongoing. He thinks it's because they are still looking into how much they actually stole, as they've both been there a while. Jorge about 8 years and Shay 10 years. I doubt they'll have security footage of all that time, but I bet they're trying to get a more accurate figure to really nail them. And in comes a new character, Tammy, obviously not her real name. She is an employee who was hired and fired shortly before I was at the same store. She lasted just past her probation before she was fired. Wait for it. For months' worth of cash differences and false till checks she wasn't made aware of prior. However, her situation is far worse than mine. Tammy is in the process of suing the company for wrongful termination alongside financial and emotional damages, as she was put under a lot of stress while in the job by Shay, who apparently left her to fend for herself and would refuse to step in when customers got aggressive, and then had a miscarriage shortly after her employment was terminated. Our area manager doesn't know anything more, as it's escalated and gone way above his head, and I doubt I'll be able to get any more information on it. But I doubt the company's doing too well on that front, and I wish her the best. Gordon and I are considering reaching out to some of the other fired employees, of which he can name a few who were terminated for similar reasons, to get their side of things. But it seems very clear that what Shay and Jorge were doing was going on for a long time, and I was only the latest scapegoat. Janelle, unfortunately, is perfectly fine as far as I'm aware. Her husband and she opened a taxi company several years ago, and she seems to have just got more involved with that. I haven't seen her, so I wouldn't know. But she was terminated for gross misconduct and for not following procedure, which is kind of what I expected. And Kara, who our area manager actually really dislikes, but is lovely and did not deserve what she went through, is doing okay. I've messaged her, and she and her partner recently bought a house. She also got a job as an events manager at a local historical site. She's happier there as she actually has people to talk to at work and isn't alone anymore.